Welcome, everyone. Please come in. Welcome. All right. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Fayetteville. My name is Joseph Diego Armendariz. My family and I have been members of this fellowship since May of 2023, and I am currently serving as a member at the fellowship on the board of directors. Unitarian Universalism is a religious tradition that values freedom in religious thought and journey. We uphold the unity of our interconnections, connections to each other, to all of life, and to the precious universe of which we are a part. We affirm the universality of love and hope as we journey together in community, and we welcome you, whoever you are at this moment, and wherever you are in your spiritual journey. For those of you who are joining us online, welcome. If you are new, please check out our website, uufayetteville.org, for more information, our amazing website. Also, for those of you who are visiting for the first time in person, you can find a visitor information card on the seat backs in front of you. Please, we would love for you to fill one of these out if you can, so that we can include you on the email list and keep you informed. So please find one of these if you're visiting. So a very big welcome to both our in-person and our online visitors. A very big welcome. We have an outstanding service planned for today. I just wanted to say an extremely brief word, a very personal word about what feeling welcome at this fellowship means to me. Extremely brief. Our membership team leader, who might email you if you fill out a card, Charlotte Taylor, is one example among many of individuals who have made me feel very welcome at this fellowship. The origin of me and Charlotte's friendship dates back to when my little brother was in grade school, and her son and my brother were on a basketball team together. Now, when I see Charlotte, I know that I can expect a number of things, okay? I know that I can expect a smile and a hug. I know that I can expect financial support from her and Tim for my children's many fundraisers, like Girl Scout cookies and things like that. And I think at least once Charlotte has straightened my collar and done things like that for me, kind of just effortlessly motherly, okay? But that's all of my story, and thank you for letting me share this brief personal example of what being welcome means to me. But I'm just very grateful, and it's very unexpected, that tiny seedling of friendship that was planted at the Boys and Girls Club more than 15 years ago has grown into such a beautiful oasis of friendship and welcoming. So that's all I want to say about what being welcome means to me. Later in our service, and this is actually a bit of a change here, later in our service, there will be a time when everyone is invited to come forward and drop a stone in our Joys and Concerns ceremony. Please listen, because there is a change. If you have a joy or concern, please find one of these yellow cards and fill these out. There is a place to indicate whether you would like this shared, and again, please give me your attention, or whether you would like it private. Today, the joys and concerns will be collected during the offering, okay? And that is different than what is in your printed order of service, okay? But I would like you to please fill out your joys and concerns cards. They will be reviewed with Reverend Renee and church leadership, like they always are. And they will be collected during the offering, okay? Which is different than your order of service, but that is because of the unique needs of our service today, okay? If you are in need of hearing assistance, our AV Tech David can help you with that. Children are always welcome in our service, but there is a staff nursery available downstairs with outstanding child care staff. And lastly, please remember to silence your cell phones as we start service. And now Reverend Renee is going to say a few brief words about the very special service we have planned for today.
Good morning, everyone. I am extremely excited about this service. I had to beg Jory to do this. She did one of these for us last year, And it was one of my favorite services of the year. And so I was very, very thrilled when she said that she would be willing to do another one for us this year after I asked about 15 times. Jory and I have been friends since 2008. We've been making music together, closely making music together since 2009. And she has been a part of our professional staff here at UUFF since 2020. We are incredibly lucky to have her as one of our accompanists. And I would like to tell you that she has a radio show. This is my favorite radio show of all radio shows. It is on KPSQ. You can find that on your dial or at kpsq.org. It's Fridays at 3, and it is about women in music. It is amazing, and I hope that you will check out her amazing radio show. More things about Jory can be found at jorycostello.com. Today, there will be some strong language, and that's okay. It's don't worry about your children. It is way less than they hear at school, I promise. Okay, and finally, the music that we are singing today as a congregation and as a choir were written by our siblings of color, for our siblings of color. I am not trying to make assumptions here, but most of us are white. And maybe the first hymn is, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. We've never not known that. So what we are doing here today as a congregation is singing in honor of and in solidarity with. So this is not our music. We are singing this in honor of our siblings of color. Thank you. Jory?
Hi, everyone. This year in our country marks 60 years since the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964. That's 100 years after the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation, which abolished slavery, gave black people citizenship, and outlawed discrimination in voting. Sounds pretty good, right? Then why did we need civil rights? And what does it mean? And why did it take 100 years? So at the time of emancipation, 1863, there were now over 4 million freed people in the South, and about 500,000 black people living in other parts of the country, establishing African American communities. Black people in the South did get 12 years of the Reconstruction era and made huge progress, becoming business owners and lawyers and holding political office and all manner of thriving in society. But then, in 1877, due to political shifting and shiftiness, the safeguards of the Northern troops were removed from the South, and the rest of those 100 years were filled with hateful discrimination, intense violence, riots, mobs, lynchings, murders, mutilations, assassinations. It's heinous and deplorable. Whereas the northern states didn't agree with slavery, they sure didn't think blacks were equal, or should vote, or live next door, or swim in the same pools, or even drink out of the same water fountains. This time in our country was known as the Jim Crow laws, where state and local governments manipulated the law and restricted the newly gained freedoms of African Americans, ousted them from political office, and overlooked or even encouraged violence against black people, especially in the areas of education and voting and housing. But the civil rights movement changed that. There are so many things and people and events that led up to it. Any progress made before the 50s was likely due to the NAACP in 1909 or the National Urban League in 1910. Now, using the law, they were able to gain some wins in court. But overall, something else had to happen, something bigger, something more drastic. And in the 1950s, another sort of leadership began to arise in the South. And they had different approaches of direct action and mass mobilization to advance the rights of African Americans. And as more and more organizations became involved, strategies were planned involving non-violent protesting and civil disobedience like sit-ins and boycotts. And a movement was on the rise. One of the places to learn all this was the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee. Activists from around the country came to be trained in this nonviolent philosophy and learn the songs of the movement. Every movement needs music. The use of music in the civil rights movement was purposeful and served as a vital part of communication and community building. African American spirituals, gospel, folk music all played an important role. Singers and musicians collaborated with song collectors and ethnomusicologists to spread the songs to activists both at large meetings and in publications. Singing together, making waves of sound and vibration, being moved by that is the power of music. Think of the power of an ocean wave. Singing helped motivate on the long marches. Singing helped keep up psychological strength while being harassed. Singing helped to express hope and faith and grief. And singing brought the cultural connection and the shared mindset. A major turning point in the movement was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. And the purpose of the march was to advocate for the civil and economic rights of African Americans. It was the largest demonstration by far, but just one demonstration that was part of a series of hundreds of organized demonstrations rooted in over 400 years of oppression. The March on Washington did eventually lead to the 3 Civil Rights Acts in the 60s: desegregation, real voting rights, and fair housing. But that's not very long ago, folks. And although much progress has been made, it still hasn't fully addressed the damage that's been done, nor the systemic racism that's still in our government institutions, nor the systematic disenfranchisement from 100 years of Jim Crow laws, nor did it give credit to the important roles of women in the movement. Even though women had very little spoken parts at the march, women singers and musicians shined throughout the movement, delivering moving messages, passionate calls to action, provided the cultural grounding for the event. They were powerful and influential women who faced tremendous risks both personally and professionally. They sang and performed for racial liberation and also for gender equality. Women's leadership in music and social change is central to the American story. From leading local civil rights organizations to serving as lawyers on the school segregation lawsuits, their efforts to lead the movement were often overshadowed by men. Many women experienced gender discrimination and sexual harassment within the movement, and later turned toward the feminist movements of the 70s. While their names are widely known and their individual political and artistic strategies widely differed, they're furthering their civil rights. And I'm going to talk all about it when I come back. Thank you. And now the chalice lighting. Oh.
Please join with me as we say the words for our chalice lighting. Love is the spirit of this community, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in truth, and to help one another. Thus do we covenant together.
Our opening hymn today is number 151. I wish I knew how. I don't want you to worry if you don't know every single note. I just want you to sing this from your heart. All rise as you're able. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say out loud, say unclear, for the whole world to hear. Say out loud, say unclear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart, remove all the bars that still keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me, that you'd see and agree. Everyone should be free, that you'd see and agree. Everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do, though I'm way overdue. I'd be starting anew, though I'm way overdue. I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'll soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free. Then I'd sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free. You may be seated. That was beautiful. And now for our offering.
The important work of this fellowship is possible because of your generous contributions of time, talent, and money. Every contribution of every size is helpful and appreciated. Also, please remember today that we're asking for your joys and concerns cards to be collected in the offering if possible. As we pass the offering basket, we invite you to share financially if you prefer. You may also give at our website by texting or by mailing checks to our office.
Our anthem today, some of you may remember back during the COVID days, we were lucky enough to have the amazing Melanie DeMore as our speaker 2 or 3 times. She's my dear friend from the Bay Area, and she wrote this next piece. Take this into your hearts, friends. You can clap for that.
Yes. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, choir. The main time period of the women in today's message are from the 50s and 60s. But first, we shall set the tone in 1939 with Marian Anderson. She was the first African-American woman to break through the color lines of opera, the first to perform on many of the major stages at the time, but the first she's remembered for throughout the world is her solo performance in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And at first, her request to sing at the nation's capital was denied because she was black. And it was Eleanor Roosevelt who intervened and arranged. And of course, Franklin got the credit. So there was Marian Anderson, Easter Sunday, 1939, in front of the Lincoln Memorial, singing to a fully integrated audience of 75,000 people. I think I'm shaking. This iconic concert, symbolizing the promise of protest, sparked the beginning of what would become a movement. Thereafter, the Lincoln Memorial, with its clear meaning of emancipation, would become an important site for asserting black civil rights. Her performance reached millions of listeners around the world, including a 10-year-old Martin Luther King Jr. And at 15, he was so moved by the experience, he wrote an essay about it. And he cited her concert then as an inspiration for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, for which she returned to the very same site and sang the very last song of the event after MLK gave his famous I Have Dreams speech. Another person inspired by Marian Anderson was Mahalia Jackson. Known as the mother of gospel and widely considered one of the most influential voices of the 20th century, with a career spanning over 40 years, she was integral to the development of gospel blues in black churches across the United States. Blending spiritual expression with civil rights activism, she touched the hearts and souls of countless Americans during her lifetime. Although she was born in the South, she moved to Chicago as a teenager to be able to sing in an early gospel group. She had a strict moral code, knowing that her singular purpose, her calling, was to deliver God's word through song. She didn't sing in juke joints or nightclubs. She recorded no secular music, yet she is credited with inspiring rhythm and blues, soul, and rock and roll singing styles. She rose to prominence in 1947, and she was known for her powerful vocal range, her enormous stage presence, and her ability to relate to the audience. She often demonstrated intense, passionate emotion during performances, weeping and moaning and wailing and dancing and dropping to the floor and just letting the Spirit move through her as she was led. And while attending the National Baptist Convention in 1956, Mahalia met MLK and Robert Abernathy, both ministers emerging as organizers protesting segregation, and Mahalia jumped right in, becoming one of the most prominent gospel singers of the civil rights movement and a personal friend to the King family. She raised money for MLK's Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and she also campaigned for JFK, who intervened when MLK was arrested and put in prison for a lunch-in sit-in in Atlanta. She was inconsolable when JFK was assassinated, believing he had died fighting for the rights of black Americans. At the March on Washington, it was Mahalia who prompted MLK to speak about the dream, because he was going to leave that part out, because he'd been speaking about it too long. That's what the other organizers thought. But Mahalia insisted. And that speech that was called Normalcy Never Again is now known as I Have a Dream. And 5 years later, she sang at his funeral. But Mahalia's legacy reached international proportions, initiating the golden age of gospel. Her success had a profound influence on black American identity. She believed that black wealth and capitalism should be reinvested into black people, and she founded the Mahalia Jackson Foundation, which has paid for over 50 college students' tuition, a non-denominational temple for young people in Chicago to learn gospel music, and organized a 1969 concert called A Salute to Black Women. She also branched out into business with comedian Minnie Pearl and opened a chain of restaurants called Mahalia Jackson's Chicken Dinners. And she lent her name to a line of canned food. Upon her death, singer Harry Belafonte called her the most powerful black woman in the United States. And there was not a single field hand, a single black worker, or a single black intellectual who did not respond to her. Both Marian Anderson and Mahalia Jackson got their start during the time known as the Harlem Renaissance, when many, many people moved out of the South and they established black communities in other places. Another performer of that era whose work contributed to civil rights is the legendary Lena Horne. She's on the cover of your service today. A groundbreaking African-American performer and civil rights advocate, Lena Horne's career spanned more than 70 years. She appeared in nightclubs, film, television, theater, all while releasing well-received albums. Her grandmother was an early suffragette and civil rights activist and had a primary influence on her life. Lena fought against racism in the entertainment industry throughout her career and against racial discrimination in this country throughout her entire life. Lena Horne was the first African American to be signed to MGM Hollywood Studios. She made several musicals with all-black casts, but was never cast in any leads for other films because she had to be edited out to show the films in other states that didn't allow black performers, and therefore her parts didn't really have any relevance to the film, which led her to become the first African-American director on the board of directors to the Screen Actors Guild. Beginning her active involvement with the civil rights in the 1940s, she began singing at the Cafe Society in New York, the first integrated venue. She became politically allied with Paul Robeson in the liberal organization Progressive Citizens of America. In the late 40s, Lena sued a number of restaurants and theaters for race discrimination. And while entertaining troops for the USO during World War II, she refused to perform for segregated audiences. So while staging her show for African American soldiers, she saw that they had been forced to sit behind the white German POWs. So she walked off of that stage, and that's right, to the first row where the black troops were seated and performed with the Germans behind her. And she filed a complaint with the NAACP, and she financed her own travels to entertain black troops when the MGM Studios pulled her off its tour. She joined Eleanor Roosevelt's campaign for anti-lynching legislation. She worked on behalf of Japanese Americans facing discrimination. And during the anti-communist hearings of the 1950s in the U.S. Congress, Lena was among hundreds of entertainers blacklisted because of their progressive political views and social activism. In the 1960s, she performed in the South at civil rights rallies, participated in the 1963 March, and supported the work of the National Council for Negro Women. She was a registered Democrat and was part of the group of DNC officers who visited JFK in the White House 3 days before he was assassinated. In 1978, Lena Horne returned to the big screen in her role as Glinda, the Good Witch, in The Wiz. And in 1980, she starred in her own Broadway musical, Lena Horne, The Lady and Her Music. It ran for 300 performances on Broadway, and she was able to relate the discrimination she faced in Hollywood. She went on to tour that show throughout the country and London, and finally eventually retired in 2000, and she passed in 2010. The all-woman band, the Skylarks, were the most popular black singing group of the 1950s in South Africa, with founding member Miriam Makeba. At the age of 20, in 1952, Miriam Makeba was featured singing in a controversial documentary filmed in secret, showing the harsh conditions that black South Africans were forced to live in under the white apartheid government. Apartheid was Africa's system of discrimination and segregation, just like the Jim Crow laws here. Receiving critical acclaim for her role in the movie, she was invited to Italy to receive an award in 1959. Because of that, she was not allowed back into her country. She lived in exile in several countries, immigrated here during the Civil Rights Movement, educating the world about Africa, its culture, its struggle, through her extreme pain of being separated from her family and her ancestors, not even being allowed back for her mother's burial. She became known as Mama Africa, leaving a legacy of remarkable global impact. While in exile in her own country, she was able to protest for international inequality in a way that educated and empowered African American artists. She became friends with Nina Simone and Abbey Lincoln. She showed them what they were and what they could become. She wore her hair natural with little or no makeup, showing a strong sense of self and her African identity, her sexuality, free of Western-imposed standards. Just for being in the United States, it was her form of activism against the apartheid government who was trying to silence her and erase her from her people. Possibly even erase the whole African culture. She did this not because she was political. She said she didn't know what that word meant. She did this because, as a South African, you sing about what is happening around you, especially the things that hurt. She encouraged African artists to sing in their native language as an international act of decolonization and a marker of Pan-African identity. Her legacy goes beyond countries, beyond generations, influencing each to live a life of authenticity, fearlessness, and bravery. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was freed from 27 years in prison to take his rightful place as leader of South Africa, and he urged Miriam Makeba to come home. After 31 years in exile, she returned and became a goodwill ambassador for South Africa to the United Nations. And Mandela presented her with the Presidential Award in 1999. Her humanitarian work lives on in the Zinzile Miriam Makeba Foundation, the Miriam Makeba Rehabilitation Center for Abused Girls, as well as all her awareness she did for HIV and AIDS. A quote from her 2004 autobiography: "I kept my culture, I kept the music of my roots. Through my music, I became this voice and image of Africa and the people without even realizing." While in the US in the 60s, Miriam Makeba's friendship with Nina Simone was very integral to her becoming a civil rights activist. Nina considered her musical style as Black classical music, always including songs that drew on her African American heritage. But starting in 1963, she shifted her career from artist to activist, using her music to advance the cause of civil rights, becoming one of the most passionate, most outspoken, and most gifted performers for the cause. The way she commented and participated helped shape Black activism and how people expressed their rage and their demands and their claims for freedom. She rejected the calls for patient, gradual baby steps for rights of African Americans. She wasn't all that concerned with integration as much as just Black people being free to live and do and act as they wanted. Nina spoke and performed at several cities, several civil rights meetings, including the Selma to Montgomery March. She believed an artist's responsibility was to reflect the times, and did she ever. For the first time, she addressed the racial inequality in the United States in her song, Mississippi Goddamn. This was her response to the June 12, 1963 murder of NAACP Field Secretary Medgar Evers. He was like the Mississippi version of MLK. He was the most impassioned activist, orator, visionary for change. Being a World War II veteran, he fought for voting rights for African Americans, for equality. He fought against brutality. His activism nearly doubled the involvement of young people for civil rights in Mississippi. And at the time, he was gathering witnesses and testimony from the brutal murder of young 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955, which brought national attention to the terrorism used against African Americans. Medgar Evers' death was the first of a civil rights martyr. Over 5,000 people attended Medgar Evers' funeral, and a permit had to be granted for the large crowd on the condition there be no slogans, no shouting, and no singing. Well, that didn't work. Hundreds of young mourners began to sing, and the police responded with attack dogs and billy clubs. And as those young people became enraged and wanted to respond with violence, other civil rights activists begged them not to. And this also showed the power of nonviolence, as this incident reached national news as well. And this all happened just 2 months before the March on Washington. The other incident that led to the song Mississippi Goddamn was the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. An act of white terrorism by the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacists who killed. This bomb killed 4 young black girls and partly blinded a 5th. Birmingham was the most segregated city in the U.S. in 1963. It became a focus for MLK and other ministers, and where they launched a campaign to register African American voters. This bombing happened in September of '63, just mere weeks after the March on Washington. These events changed Nina Simone's life, and from then on, she devoted her career to protesting inequality. Civil rights became a normal message in her performances, and she would later record songs for the cause such as Old Jim Crow, Go Limp, Backlash Blues with lyrics by Langston Hughes. She recorded Billy Taylor's I Wish I Knew How. Her song To Be Young, Gifted, and Black was a tribute to her friend Lorraine Hansberry, who died before she could finish her play of the same name. And she co-wrote Why the King of Love is Dead 3 days after the assassination of MLK in 1968. She would also go on to write another song based on those 4 girls who died in the church bombing called For Women. And this song went on to expose the Eurocentric beauty standards imposed on black women in America, with skin tones ranging from light to dark, using 4 stereotypes of the African American woman at that time: the mammy, the tragic mulatto, the sex worker, and the angry black woman. The purpose of that song was to inspire black women to define beauty and identify for themselves without society's expectations. 60 years later, the high priestess of soul, Nina Simone, brings to life the history of an era like no other. A time when people stood up ready to die for change. Without excuse or apology, Simone's song, Mississippi Goddamn, stands as a powerful indictment against an unjust and racist society. It challenged the belief that race relations had to happen gradual and slow. She called for more immediate developments. The song was released as a single and boycotted in many southern states, including her home state of North Carolina, which smashed her albums and sent them back to the record label. One more artist that can't go without mentioning. Actually, there's many more. What I can't go without mentioning are the voices of Fannie Lou Hamer, Coretta Scott King, Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan. Although not known, most of them not known as professional singers, except we know Bernice Johnson Reagan went on to form Sweet Honey and the Rock. But at that time, she was part of the Freedom Singers at the march. She went on to form the Harambee Singers before Sweet Honey and the Rock. Coretta Scott King picked up right where her husband left off. She launched the Poor People's Campaign, and she became a staunch supporter for women's rights, LGBT rights, and spoke up against apartheid in South Africa. And she made sure that Martin Luther King's birthday became a federal holiday. The last artist I'd like to bring up is Joan Baez. Her father was Mexican, her mother was Scottish, and she too endured racial discrimination as a child, and making it more determined to fight for justice as an adult. Her father worked for UNESCO, part of the United Nations, and she lived in 7 different countries. So she brings a more world view to our civil rights movement here. Her first act of civil disobedience was refusing to leave her school classroom during an air raid drill. She also toured the southern states, refusing to play at segregated colleges, instead choosing historically black colleges and universities. She met MLK as a teenager, and it was Joan Baez who sang "We Shall Overcome" at the march, accompanied by the Freedom Singers. She also sang at the 1965 Selma to Montgomery marches. She became more vocal about her disagreement with Vietnam, asking her audiences to resist taxes and encourage draft resistance. She went to jail for 11 days for disturbing the peace, but she said she was trying to disturb the war. Joan Baez has performed contemporary folk music and social justice songs for over 60 years, releasing over 30 albums, continuing to advocate for social issues along the way, like LGBT rights, prison and death penalty reform, the Iranian people, the Iraq War, tree sit-ins for urban farmers, Occupy Wall Street, and the Catalan independence movement. She was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She retired in 2019, but left a legacy to inspire and embolden all of us. Thank you, and oh, I do have an introduction for this next song, right? I thought I might. So we are going to sing "We Shall Overcome," and it can be traced back to 2 separate songs from over 100 years ago. The lyrics from "I'll Overcome Someday," written by East Coast Methodist minister Charles Tindley in 1903, and the melody from a traditional African-American gospel song, "I'll Be All Right." Learning it at a labor strike in South Carolina, activist folk singer Zilphia Horton brought it to the folk school, where she taught Pete Seeger. And along with the school's Guy Carawan, they put musical accompaniment to it, making it much easier to spread to vast amounts of people. They actually registered copyright on the song and formed a nonprofit organization that they could put all the royalties into, called "We Shall Overcome Fund," which is still active in giving grants to African American communities to use art and activism against injustice. Please let the choir sing it.
All of us. Rise as you are able for hymn number 169, one of the Black national anthems, "We Shall Overcome."
We shall overcome.
may be seated.
Please join me as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Some very brief announcements. We have a few team meetings this week, a covenant group meeting on Monday at 6, a chalice team meeting on Wednesday at 6:30, and then a board of directors meeting Thursday at 6:30. And all of those Zoom links can be found on the calendar, which is on the website.
One more. Friends, we are collecting hearty soups for Seven Hills Homeless Shelter. If you would please, you'll see on our altar that we have 3 cans of soup. This is important. Seven Hills is in need of this. What they are hoping for are hearty soups and chilies with the pop-top cans, because there is too much hunger in a place like Northwest Arkansas.
Also, there's a Being UU class coming up for anybody who's interested in joining UU.
A Being UU class,
It's on March 17th.
March 17th, right after service.
By the time the March on Washington took place in 1963, television had become much more accessible. At the very beginning of the movement in 1940, about 4,000 American homes had TV. And by 1960, 47.5 million homes had TV. Lena Horne was a staple of TV variety shows that were eager to have black guests. Mahalia Jackson starred in her own TV program. Actresses like Cicely Tyson, Diane Carroll, and Abby Lincoln were on prime-time TV and mainstream movies, making choices, even subtle ones, to represent not only black Americans, but black women as strong, dignified, intelligent, complex, and worldly, without compromising their values, free from racial stereotypes placed on black women. That also means that the violence happening in the South was shown on TV. So for the first time, the people in the North, who had remained indifferent for decades, could now see the violence of the Freedom Rides and the Selma to Montgomery marches, could see the story of the murder of Medgar Evers, and follow along how the murderers were acquitted twice. They could see the rubble left from the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church and see the pictures of those 4 little girls who were killed. They could see and hear in real time the March on Washington and the 9 speakers and all the women musicians and what they represented. They could see the passion of Mahalia Jackson, the righteous anger of Miriam Makeba and Nina Simone. Although they weren't at the march, they were on TV. But now, after 60 years of TV and even more powerful technology, where we saw another movement form focused on racial inequality and racially motivated violence, are civil rights enough? Are civil rights working? It seems like they could be eroding right in front of our eyes. Women's issues are actually going backwards, and voting rights are all messed up. Many governments are choosing to sacrifice civil rights in the name of security against terrorism. Plus, this country still hasn't passed an equal rights amendment for women. The Constitution still says all men are created equal. How simple would it be to change it to all people are created equal? Come on. Are we taking for granted these civil rights? Virtually all nations deny some civil rights to some minority groups, either by law or custom. And while there is a universal Declaration of Human Rights that wasn't even a thing until 1948, there's still no worldwide standard. Historically, when a significant portion of a nation's people feel they are treated unfairly, civil rights movements emerge. It's not very hopeful, my closing words, but I thank you for continuing thinking about these things, continuing justice and social reform in our country, and for keeping in mind other countries that go through the same issues. And I do hope that we all shall overcome. Thank you very much.